This month, we are going to talk about the new credit cards some of us have been receiving. As of October 1st, 2015, new credit cards are being issued with computer chips in them. These cards are called EMV cards. EMV stands for EuroPay, MasterCard, and Visa. The October 1st, 2015 was the date agreed to by Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover for the changeover to these new cards. However, the transition will be gradual since merchants have to acquire new equipment and change their payment systems. Less than 50% of all merchants are expected to be EMV compliant by the end of 2015. The United States is the last major market that is still using the old magnetic stripe card system. European countries moved to EMV technology years ago to combat high fraud rates. These new and improved cards are designed to improve security. Specifically, it makes it more difficult for crooks to successfully counterfeit cards. Counterfeit cards account for 37% of all credit card fraud. For merchants and financial institutions, the switch to EMV means adding new in-store payment technology and processing system. Of important note is there are new liability rules in case of fraudulent transactions. For consumers, it means activating new cards and learning new payment processes. We're going to take a look here, and we see here this is the current magnetic stripe card that we use. And it has numbers on it and expiration dates, and we use them through this typical device that we're all used to seeing where the card is placed in and swiped through the system. And on these magnetic stripe devices, there is fixed information that's encoded on the card. And the fact that the information is fixed makes this information very easy to steal. Now the new card, it looks similar, and it's about the same, it is the same dimensions. It may be a little thicker, but I don't think you'd really notice that. And you see up here that there's a little chip. Okay, and this computer chip is containing information that will be dynamic. And by dynamic, I mean that each time you use this card for a transaction, the information associated with that transaction will change, and therein lies the security. Now, the way these new devices work, you see this is a picture of a device, and you'll notice that it still has the facility to be able to swipe the card, but there's also an entrance in the front of the device that allows the card to be placed in and held there and then pulled out. And that's how the magnetic how the chip is read. And that process is called dipping. So instead of cards being swiped now, the cards are going to be dipped. Okay? Now, of important note is there are new liability rules in case of fraudulent transactions. But first, I want to go through a few other issues with these EMV cards. Okay, so why are these EMV cards more secure from counterfeiting? Simply because the data on the card is changing with each transaction. Okay, how are they used? As we just showed, they are dipped instead of swiped. The dipping is going to take just a fraction of a second longer, but sometimes doing a transaction, that can seem like an eternity. Is card dipping the only option? No, it isn't. There is a technique called near-field communication where you take the card and you come up near the scanner and it will scan the information off the card. Now, therein lies a new vulnerability that we'll talk about as hackers develop ways to scan information off your card by just coming in close proximity to you, and we'll talk about that in a second. Will I still need to sign when I use the EMV card? This will be a procedure that's tied to the issuer of your card, whether there's already rules for you to sign for a debit or a credit transaction. Okay, now here's a sample of a near-field communication device where your card will be presented to a scanner, and the card will just simply be scanned over, and the information will be captured. Okay. Now, of important note, and I'm going to say this again, is there are new liability rules in case of fraudulent transactions. For consumers, it means you need to activate the new cards and learn these new payment processes. Now, approximately 120 million Americans have received new cards. By the end of 2015, it is estimated 600 million Americans will have the new card. So there's quite a range between that time period. Okay, so now let's look at how this liability changes. If the merchant that you're using the card with does not have their equipment in place, the financial institution that issued the card, they issued an EMV card, the merchant does not have the equipment in place. If the transaction turns out to be fraudulent, it will be the merchant that will be responsible for the liability of the fraudulent transaction. So let me repeat that. If the merchant does not have the EMV equipment installed, the equipment will still support swiping with the magnetic stripe. However, the merchant that swipes the card will be responsible for any fraudulent transaction. Now, that may make it more difficult for the average consumer to get compensation from a fraudulent transaction if they have to deal with the merchant rather than the fiduciary, your bank. Something else to consider is gasoline dispensers, fuel dispensers have until 2017 to make the shift to EMV technology. Can you use the EMV overseas? You can, but it's always very important to check with your fiduciary to see if they can be used overseas. What you'll find overseas, since most foreign countries have changed to using EMV technology, is that they will have shied away from using the magnetic stripe technology. So they will favor using the EMV technology over the old magnetic stripe. Now, while the EMV cards are expected to reduce card counterfeiting, it is expected that online fraud is going to increase. And this is the result of crooks losing income from card counterfeiting and needing to switch to using stolen credit card numbers. Okay, now when we use an EMV card to do an online transaction, we're still going to have to enter the credit card number. Okay, now online fraud currently accounts for 45% of all credit card fraud, and this is expected to grow with EMV technology. Let's face it, even a crook needs to make a living. In every country that has switched to EMV cards, online fraud has increased. Fraud does not go away, it moves to somewhere else, and fraud will always follow the path to money. And that somewhere else where that path leads is online. Okay? So you need to continue to familiarize yourself with EMV technology. There are numerous resources on the webs you can check, and you should always check with the issuer of your card. That's it for this Tech Talk. Practice, 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 and I'll see you next month.